morning. I'm Dr. Steve Stites, Chief Medical Officer here at the University of Kansas Health System and Executive Vice Chancellor for the University of Kansas Medical Center. Welcome back to a very special program of Open Mics with Dr. Stites and our monthly edition of Show Me the Science. Today, we're exploring the medical potential of music. Now, we all know music makes you feel something. I love music. I mean, it's in my head constantly. But translating music into medicine, actually proving its physiological and psychological effects have clinical benefits. And it's a difficult and complicated task. But those efforts are underway at a certain lab at the University of Kansas Medical Center. And joining me today is the director of that lab. Okay, now, Dr. Rebecca Lepping. Did I say it right?
You did.
Awesome. Okay. Leads the Power of Music Lab, also called the Promise Lab, spelled P-R-O-M-U-S. She is uniquely qualified to study the cross-section of music and medicine. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be great. You and I were talking before the program. I love music. I'm not going to sing. Well, maybe I will. I may disavow that promise. So thanks for being on the program today. Now, we have a lot of physician scientists at KUMC, including myself. I'm not really sure if I'm a scientist or not. But Dr. Lepping, you are not a physician. You don't see patients, but you are a musician scientist. Tell us about your background and tell us how you found this niche.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stites, for having me on the program. I am a musician scientist. I'm a music neuroscientist.
I love that.
And I have been a musician my entire life. I started playing piano when I was 5 years old. I don't remember a time where I didn't know how to read music. And I was a music major, a double music major in college at Wichita State University. I was playing piano and flute as a double major. And during that time, I took my required psychology class for Gen Ed and was really excited about psychology and the brain and why music makes me and hopefully other people feel the way we do, why we're so motivated by it. And so that started my dream of trying to understand why music has this power over us. And it was a long journey, but I started at KU Medical Center doing brain research about 20 years ago and have been looking for ways to combine music and science since then. And in 2020, I started the Promise Lab, where we're studying how music affects us physiologically, psychologically, using neuroscience tools, and how that can benefit us for health and well-being.
You know, I love that whole description. Now, you would love to see a world where providers like myself prescribe music as a form of therapy, just like we would do medication or physical therapy. So, first of all, what does it take to get people to want to do that? What's stopping us from doing that?
That is an excellent question, and I think it does happen. So music therapy is a board-certified profession where therapists are sort of similar to physical therapists. They have specialized training and work with people one-on-one for specific clinical needs. But as you said before, music is very powerful and moves us and has a therapeutic benefit, even if it's not a specific clinical need. It's good for us, it's good for our soul, it's good for our psychology and our well-being. The thing that is stopping us from being able to prescribe it is that often in research related to music, music is sort of used as this umbrella term. And it would be like if you did a clinical trial with a medication and you said, we gave the patients a white pill. When you say we gave the patients music, that's essentially what you're saying. There's not enough specificity in that for us to understand what specific things about the music, what the pitches are, what the tempo is, to be able to have something that is effective and replicable from one person to the next, from one situation to the next, because we haven't really looked at deeply at what the mechanism is that we're trying to target.
You know, that is fascinating to think about it, and it has to be very individualized then, Dr. Lepping, as you go through that, right? That's a pretty individualized course of therapy, so lots of science to find and
there
to
is
discover.
a lot of science, yes.
That is really, really cool. Okay, now we already use music in some parts of the health system. Check out this clip.
But the heart can reflect memories. Sometimes you just don't want to see.
So that is the band Restless performing for patients inside our Lee Summit Infusion Clinic, treating mostly cancer patients, but other types of patients as well. Now, two of those band members are living with cancer themselves, getting treatment at that same clinic. And one day, a nurse practitioner noticed one of them seemed sadder than usual. She knew he used to perform, so she suggested he grab his guitar and put on a show. And it seemed to cheer up both the performers and the audience in the infusion chairs.
I fully support and believe in all aspects of the body, mind, and spirit, back to Nursing 101, and this is a big deal to them, so it's a big deal to us. And clearly it made a difference in his personality and his mood, which overall I think will impact his health and impact his quality of life.
You know, when you're really ill, you can dwell pretty easy, you can get off on the wrong track, but music gives you a serenity that's like no other.
That's an awesome thing, helping patients out at the Lee Summit Infusions Clinic. And now, I'm sure music is therapeutic for patients, but Dr. Lapping, there's a difference between therapeutic music and true musical therapy. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So what we saw there was people using music in a therapeutic way, and people do this all the time. They use music to affect their mood, to affect how they're feeling in a moment, to use music to get them motivated to do exercise or to change the state that they're in. And one of the things that's wonderful about music is that it is universal, it is free, anyone can sing a song, or listen to iTunes.
Anyone could sing a song, not everybody could carry a tune. I'm just saying, you're going to find out in a minute, that's true.
So that would be the therapeutic aspect of music. It is therapeutic and it is a real experience. There is a difference, as I said before, between a music therapist and when you might want to see a music therapist versus when you just need to turn on some music to make you feel better. And it's often, I think you can think about it like physical therapy versus a personal trainer versus just doing exercise at your home or going for a walk. Going for a walk is really good for you, and we should do it as much as we can, but sometimes you need that extra help from a physical therapist to help you reach specific goals. And the same thing is true for a music therapist. It's a board-certified profession. I'm not a music therapist. I do work with music therapists, but it is a board-certified profession, and they work one-on-one with clients to achieve very specific goals through musical interactions.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. So I know my music is all about mood. So if I'm going out, I'm going to go out into the wilderness or do some fly fishing, man, that's bluegrass. If I want to get pumped up or I want to really feel much, it's musicals. And sometimes if I'm really going to just have a great ride in the car and drive down the highway and crank it up, and that's going to be Alicia Keys. So, you know, it's very different here about what your mood is going into that moment. And if I want to be more quiet and reflective, I've like a little classical stuff going on. So it's interesting how our moods can overlap with the music, as our video pointed out. So what's the overlap between music therapy and the work that's going on in your lab right now?
So in our lab, in the Promise Lab, what we are trying to do is understand what might be specific about music and how within the music is that affecting our physiology and our psychology. What are the specific things? So as you can see on the screen there, again, we focus on the intersection of body, mind, and brain. And many research labs focus on a single disease. They might focus on Alzheimer's disease, or they might focus on depression. And the Promise Lab is a little bit different. We try to focus on music at the core and how that can be beneficial across a range of diseases and human experiences, from emotion, how it affects our emotion and depression and anxiety, to how it affects lung health, how it affects pain and the experience of pain, as well as dementia.
So the brain can be pretty mysterious. Now, how much do we know about what is happening in the brain when we listen to music or play music?
So we know quite a lot about what's going on in the brain. There's been research into what's happening in the brain from so many different perspectives for the last 30 years at least. And music is different than so many things because it affects almost every part of our brain and every part of our body. So when we hear music, the first thing that happens is very specific cells in our cochlea, in our ear, are pitch sensitive. And music is often made up of lots of different pitches, so chords and different melodic lines. All of that is occurring within our ear, goes directly to our brainstem and a place in the brain called the inferior colliculus, which sound is the fastest processed stimulus, faster than vision, faster than sight, faster than touch. Sound is processed fastest in your brain. That then feeds into your limbic system, which affects your emotions, and your part of the brain called the anterior insula, which is how you feel on the inside, so how you understand how your body feels. And so we interpret music and what it means in terms of how it makes us feel. That can also trigger our motor cortex if it makes us feel like we want to dance. And all of this is from just hearing music. So it also can trigger memories, what we associate with music previously, and social togetherness, what it means for who we are as our identity, and all those experiences that we've had together.
That's a great explanation, and it is sort of the shared experience, like when you're all sitting around listening to a concert and things of that nature. Okay, so there is a device here sitting on our table.
There is.
That is not one that I own, so I'm going to guess this may be related to you. So can you play us a little something, explain how our brains might be reacting, might be processing what we're hearing?
Yes, I love that you talked about using different kinds of music to affect your mood differently. And beyond that, I think different aspects of the music can affect us differently. So here's one example.
That's one of the most famous chords. That opening, you just know it's coming, right? And oh, I'm relaxed. That's the most beautiful thing.
What's happening right then? Your vagus nerve is activating, triggering the opposite of your fight and flight.
Yes.
Calming you down, slowing your heart rate, slowing your breathing. We know that from research that's been done measuring physiological responses when people are listening to music like the Debussy. Mm-hmm. It's different, though, if I play something like this.
Yeah, it's a little more, let's get up and go here. Let's go.
Exactly. Yeah, so the difference is there. We have a rhythm that's setting up expectations. It's a little bit more agitated. It's still classical music. Right? Both of those are classical music, no words, but the music itself is very different. Sometimes music will trigger memories of things that it was associated with. So if I would play
here it comes.
I would say the music is a little ominous, but also it brings up all that excitement of the movies that you might have seen,
Oh my God.
the Imperial March.
How many times? Darth Vader, here we go.
Yes. So it's a combination of what the music is telling you, but also what your memory is telling you. And identity formed as part of that. So you might be part of a different identity group.
Yes, that would be me.
Yes.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
For our Trekkie fans.
Oh yeah, I can hum this one. Live long and prosper. That's what music does.
Yes. So there's a lot of overlap in what music might mean that isn't related at all to music. And as a musician, I'm a little bit biased that I think there is an effect of music. As a scientist, I need to know whether that is, how common that is, how broad is that, how central is that to our human experience, so that we can get to the point where we can prescribe music. Because I also recognize that not everyone has been playing piano since they've been 5 years old and has been so steeped in music that maybe my experience is different from other people. So we need those randomized controlled trials, the gold standard research evidence, to develop music-based interventions that are really going to be scalable and beneficial for people beyond just it makes us feel good.
I love that, man. Hey, when I went down in the river to pray, singing about them good old days. Okay, enough of that. Let's look at some of your lab's research. The Clinical Journal of Pain published results from one of your pilot studies last fall. It involved brain scans of teenagers living with chronic pain. How was that study designed?
So this was a collaboration with our colleagues at Children's Mercy. And these were teenagers who were living with chronic pain. Some of them had been living with chronic pain for many years. And at Children's Mercy, they have an intensive multidisciplinary pain treatment program where they have clinical psychologists, physical therapists, exercise physiologists, music therapists, art therapists. The teenagers would go through this multi-week program for helping them to learn ways to live with their pain, manage their pain, so that they can improve their ability to do their activities of daily living. Things like getting themselves dressed and getting themselves to school and living a productive life. And so we had these teenagers come in for brain scans, for functional MRI scans, before and after they went through this program. And while they were having the brain scans, we had them experiencing different kinds of pain. So one of them was an actual physical experience of pain. We had a little wire filament that we poked them with. So it caused some pain but didn't injure them. And we looked at what their brains were doing when they were experiencing that physical pain. We also had them looking at two different kinds of pictures related to pain. One was pictures of people experiencing physical pain, and one was pictures of people experiencing emotional pain, sadness and heartbreak. And for adults with chronic pain, often you've had an entire lifetime where you didn't have pain, and it's very easy to separate emotional pain from physical pain. You know what it feels like with heartbreak. Even though it hurts, you know that you're not physically hurting. For kids who've been having their brains develop at the same time as having chronic pain, it's difficult for them to separate those two things. And so that was a big part of the treatment program, was separating physical pain experiences from emotional pain. And so our research was looking at how the brain responded to those different kinds of pain signals with the program. And so we saw that the different parts of the brain did change in their response, and that there were reductions in amount of disability that kids were experiencing from pain with the program, which was great. The program was working. And also something called catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is where you have an experience. We have a slide here. Catastrophizing is where you have an experience of pain or something negative, and it seems bigger. Your brain is making it bigger than it is. And so we saw that the teenagers who went through this program reduced their catastrophizing and they reduced their disability with the program. And those reductions, importantly, were related to what we were seeing in the brain when they're looking at these different pictures and experiencing pain. Here's a slide with some brains on it. Let me sort of walk you through this. So on the left-hand side, you see the arm with the bicep and sort of the pinprick poking it. So that is when the kids were experiencing that pinprick feeling of pain. We saw that there were changes in the somatosensory, which is the somatosensory cortex is responsive for when we feel those feelings. And that was associated with disability. So the more people changed that brain response, the more they changed in their disability. In the middle, you see a representation of someone experiencing physical pain. We saw changes in the frontal cortex, the front part of the brain, which is associated more with cognitive processing and understanding what that means. That was associated with changes in catastrophizing. And then when people were experiencing emotional pain, we saw differences in the frontal cortex, also in the motor cortex, and in that insula that I talked about before, of how you understand and make sense of those feelings that you're having within your body.
So now I hear you talking about pain and the brain, but where does the music side fit in all of this?
That's a great question. So as the I mentioned, this multidisciplinary program had music therapy associated with it. It wasn't a large component of the treatment. It certainly wasn't the central focus of this. But after some of these teenagers went through the program, our colleagues brought them back in for follow-up interviews, just to see how they were using the strategies that they'd learned throughout the program. And just in response to an open-ended question of what strategies are you using, it wasn't prompted at all. 7 of the 10 kids that were interviewed talked about how they were using music, which we thought was really exciting because it wasn't a direct question. We didn't say, are you listening to music for your pain? It was sort of an unprompted response. And they're using it for so many different ways. Using it for motivation to help them do the exercise that they know will help them, even though it hurts. They're using it for a distraction. When they're feeling pain or when they're having an intense flare of pain, music will help them to distract from that. And other ways as well. We haven't talked at all about music with lyrics. And lyrics, they're, when you're listening to music that has words, obviously it is activating language centers in your brain, but it also, we say that music speaks to us, and certain songs will speak to us. Lyrics can be very powerful to bring up those and really refine those feelings that are difficult to put into words.
Proud Mary, keep on rolling.
There you go.
There you go. Now you're also studying the intersection of music and lung health.
Yes.
I can't imagine a better world. I know singing can help folks focus on their diaphragmatic breathing. Your lab has a project called Empower. Tell us what that acronym stands for.
We researchers really like our acronym, so Empower is an acronym.
I make them up all the time, so this is awesome.
Let's see if I can remember it. It's kind of a long one. Empower is engaging music for pulmonary obstruction with expiratory restoration.
Holy cow, that is a long one. That's pretty cool. I'd say it's very empowering. Well, science is a team sport. We have headshots of your Empower team. Tell us a little bit about how this is working and how a model of music therapy developed at KU with Empower by a KU musical therapy research. Tell us how all that's working.
Yes, you can see on the screen our large multidisciplinary team. I'm a music neuroscientist. I have studied the brain, but I've never studied the lungs before. So this is a collaboration between imaging researchers like myself and also pulmonologists. We have Dr. Mario Castro, Dr. Nancy Stewart, our pulmonology experts on this team. We also
They're a pretty
have
smart team there. A little asthma stuff.
A little bit, yeah.
A little sleep apnea. That's good. At least sleep disease.
We have Dr. Jiwon Choi, who's an expert in lung CT quantitation. Yeah. Which is really exciting. So these imaging-related biomarkers of lung health and lung function. We're collaborating with music therapist Dr. Deanna Hansen-Abermite from our KU Lawrence campus, as well as 2 board-certified music therapists, Amy Wilson and Jennifer Welch, our research assistants and statisticians as well. So this is a large multidisciplinary team that to do team science like this takes a long time to get everyone speaking the same language. What you're looking at on the screen now is the cornerstone of Dr. Hansen-Abermite's work in music therapy called the Therapeutic Function of Music model. And as a music therapist, she's really interested in understanding what the specific elements of music are that are important to make that therapeutic change. So beyond the client and therapist relationship, but beyond the music is just making you feel good, what specifically are the music elements that are related to the mechanism? And so this is a really unique approach that she has taken, and it fits really nicely with the work that we're trying to do to get to music prescribing.
You know, this is really, really cool, and you've talked a little bit about what some of the folks in the Empower Study are doing. You also brought some lung CT scans, and full of little dots. Let's take a look at some of those.
So what you're seeing on the screen now is lung CT images. So these are lungs from 3 of the participants in our study. Along the top 3 panels, that is what their lungs looked like before they went through this program. So we did the lung CT scans. The black dots represent regions where air is trapped, but the lung tissue we believe is functional. And Dr. Choi's quantitative CT can actually separate between air trapping in functional regions and air that is in what we call emphysematous regions, or regions where the tissue has been destroyed by the disease. So we're trying with our music therapy approach with this therapeutic function of music to manipulate the music in such a way that it will target these areas of air trapping in functional areas. And along the bottom you can see the post program that went through 4 weeks of singing with a music therapist. And even though from the 3 different participants there's different levels of air trapping at baseline, all 3 of them reduced. There's fewer black dots in the bottom panel than in the top.
So it is pretty cool to take a look at that. And what kind of projects are you going to pursue next?
Well, we're hoping to, that was just a pilot study. And so preliminary evidence is very exciting, but we need to do larger trials with that. We need to do more controlled trials, again, to determine whether this is music related or whether this is breathing related or what specifically is going on here. Also, did we just happen to get a few people in our pilot study who showed an effect, and it's noise. This is why we need to have the randomized controlled trials.
So do you have any theories or hunches that you kind of think may be true about all this? Like, what's your gut or your music heart tell you?
My music heart tells me that music is important, and if you, that we as humans do it for a reason, and if you are feeling something, that you should lean into it. That you don't need someone like me, who's a researcher, or like you, who's a physician, to tell you that your experience is valid. That is what I believe. But again, as a scientist, I cannot say that with certainty.
Can I speculate for a second?
Yes, please.
Okay, here we go. Now, pure speculation, not science, but if you look back over the history of mankind, the earliest pictures, the earliest stories all have music in them. Long before there was research or symphonic orchestras or Broadway musicals or rock and roll, there were pictures of flutes and different types of musical instruments. It's always been there as far back as we can tell. There's something to that story, I think, the fact it's always been there. What do you think?
I completely agree. Some of the evolutionary models show us singing before we were speaking.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because a lot of the flutes that you're talking about, these are mimicry of sounds that we hear in the natural environment. But when we hear music, we recognize that that was created by a person. Coming back to science a little bit, there are mirror neurons in our brains that are firing when we recognize something that a human is doing and that we could do it too, which is really exciting to me. But it's also really important for social cohesion, having those shared experiences, singing together as a group, changing our physiology together as a group, changing our emotions together, going to a big concert, for example, with 10,000 people, everyone is experiencing the same thing. You don't get that in many other situations.
The answers, my friend, are below it in the wind. Okay, Hawkeye, what do you think? Here we go. All right, we're here to answer your questions. Send them in using the info on your screen. This includes the chat on YouTube or Facebook or emailing the Medical News Network. Let's check in with Doc Hawk. Two different measles topics to talk about today, and unfortunately they don't involve music. First, the big outbreak includes Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Kansas. It looks like the rate of new cases is slowing down, though, we hope.
Yeah, well, before we get to that, I would like to say that, yeah, I mean, I think concerts are extremely valuable and important. And if you can go to those and be in line with that group around you and singing or listening to that music, and especially being present if your phone is put away, I think those are just priceless experiences. So hopefully people will get out to be able to enjoy those this summer. And Steve, you know, I think we should probably try and get someone to follow you around with an organ or a keyboard and play that music that you need, or for instance, when you're walking into your meetings, maybe the Imperial March or something like that.
Oh, dude, really?
I think so. I think we can.
The Imperial March. I love you too.
We can try to get some of that.
Some people may think that's a little like Darth Vader.
But yeah, so I think the measles, you know, certainly we know that in the large Texas, New Mexico outbreak, those rates of new cases are dropping. But unfortunately, and as we see here on this graph, again, this is for mainly that Texas, New Mexico outbreak. Also has Kansas in there. We can see the new cases that are dropping, but as we have seen now, we are recognizing more cases throughout the nation. We know that the total number of cases of measles throughout the nation is going up, especially in those urban areas.
That is cool. Now, since last week, we've seen several measles cases reported in major urban areas, Dallas, Chicago, now St. Louis. Missouri health officials warned of exposure at the St. Louis Aquarium. Dr. Hawk, when someone hears about a measles exposure and they think they're at that same place at the same time, what are they expected to do?
Yeah, you know, we know that a majority of these cases, like we said, have been in those rural areas, especially those areas and those counties with lower vaccination rates, vaccination coverage, herd immunity, if you will. We know that, unfortunately, infectious diseases do not stay within county borders or certain demographics. They will infect and affect anyone that could be around. So I think it is important to note, and we want to give people information and arm them with accurate information. Do not be too concerned if you are vaccinated. Measles remains a disease of the unvaccinated. So if you are vaccinated, if your loved ones are vaccinated, understand that you are safe if you do see those exposure notifications. It is only a matter of time before we will see those in other urban areas, including here in Kansas City metro area as well. So do not be alarmed. Understand your vaccine status, your loved one's vaccine status. If you are not vaccinated, we are still going to encourage you to get vaccinated, both for your individual and family health, but also that will help the community as a whole as well, because that will help increase the vaccine coverage rates, and then that will lead to adequate herd immunity where we can stop the spread of the disease in our community. So what do you do if you see those exposure notifications? Number one, don't panic. Understand your vaccine status. If you have been vaccinated with 2 doses of the vaccine, you are considered protected. Now, if you haven't, or you don't know your vaccine status, basically what you are going to do is continue to monitor for symptoms over the next 7, 10, 14 days. It can have a longer incubation period. It's probably going to be more affecting you within that 7 days or a week. And understand that if you are starting to have symptoms, do not go to the emergency department, urgent care, or your physician's office without, number one, calling them first, contacting them, letting them know that that's what you think you want to be evaluated for. That way they can take the precautions within their facility to keep everybody else, the patients around them, safe as well. So I think it is important to know and understand that please call ahead if you think you need to be evaluated for measles illness. The other thing to understand is that you are contagious with the disease 4 days prior to the rash until 4 days after the rash onset as well. And we should continue to emphasize the fact that the vaccine is the safest, most efficacious way to prevent the disease as well as the complications from the disease. There is no adequate data to support the use of vitamin A for prophylaxis nor treatment of measles disease.
All right, good stuff. And Hawk, what's your favorite music?
My favorite music? Anything with a band, really. I got a few concerts lined up for this summer, so
you do.
We're going to have some fun times, yeah.
All right, Alexis Del Cid is watching for questions from our community. Alexis, what's singing in your heart?
Good morning. Well, I know you have Star Trek on your mind, right?
I bet. Hey Jude.
Beatles. Okay. Jeremy has a question. This is a good one. He wants to know, are there musical pieces that work universally for people, or does it depend on the person and their age?
That is such a fantastic question. And it's a question I get often is some music better than others? And going back to what I believe is my musician's heart, any music that is made by people has value. And if that's the music that speaks to you, then go with it. But I do think there are musical universals. So the highly rhythmic music is going to activate your motor system more. So if you want something to get you going for exercise, maybe that's what you should go for. If you want something that's going to be more relaxing, maybe steer away from the highly rhythmic, lots of percussion, louder music to something that's more lyrical and more expansive.
We have several comments coming in, so I want to share some of those from our viewers. This has really touched a note with our viewers. Joellen McGranahan writes, as a musician, I recognize a selection, but if I can't identify the name, I get frustrated. That would be frustrating. Then Georgianne Grunthau.
Just put it on there. I do it all the time.
Cheering. Georgianne writes, Claire de Lune really slowed down my breathing. Love this program. Thank you to all. Lisa Howsam writes, what an interesting and unique program. I love it. And Yvonne shares, I never thought about music in terms of science. Very interesting. And Angie has a question. This is a medical question for Dr. Hawkinson. Angie wants to know, Dr. Hawkinson, do you think the weather improving and people going outside more is contributing to a decrease in measles cases?
Yeah, certainly we do understand for those seasonal respiratory viruses like influenza, RSV, common cough and cold viruses, and of course SARS-CoV-2, that can play a role. However, I think we have to understand also the difference between the transmission of those viruses and measles virus. Certainly it could. However, you have to understand that there will be a lot of travel. We do understand that measles, if you are actively infected and spreading the disease, again, 4 days prior to the rash, to 4 days afterward, you can be expressing that measles virus into the environment. So if you are traveling, for instance, in an airport, if you are going to an indoor show or concert, if you are going to a party, we do understand and know that that measles virus will remain in the air for approximately 2 hours. So anybody walking through that space within that 2 hours has the potential to be infected. So it's very difficult to say if that will be true because we know there will be a lot of travel and all those other things that I mentioned as well. It's not clear. I don't believe there will be a decrease in measles because of that, just because of the long exposure period in those contained spaces when people are in those spaces doing things, either travel or seeing shows, for instance.
Marie has a question about music therapy. We have one more. Marie wants to know, what music therapy can do for people living with dementia and Alzheimer's.
We often think about Alzheimer's as a memory-specific disease or condition. And when people are living with Alzheimer's, there's so many other associated symptoms that come along with that. Often there is a lot of anxiety and other mood disorders, agitation. There are social barriers that come up with Alzheimer's, so as communication becomes more difficult. And music has so many different potential applications in this population. In my lab, we've been doing a study looking at how elder care communities in our area are using music. Music is not part of the standard of care for elder care communities. They have to provide, shelter and food and medication and nursing support, but they don't necessarily have to provide music. But every place that we went in Kansas City is using music in some form or another, and some of them are using it a lot because the staff who work at these places, they recognize that it's helpful. And beyond just reducing anxiety and helping with agitation, it is a way for people who are living with dementia to live positive, productive, happy lives and increase the quality of life even with a diagnosis of dementia.
You know, this has been just a great discussion, and Dr. Lepping, it's been a pleasure. Let's start final thoughts. Hawk, I'm actually going to start with you for your final thought this time.
Yeah, so I think that was a good question by our viewer about measles and maybe reduction in transmission this summer. I think most of the experts do expect that this measles outbreak in the United States, this transmission in the United States, will continue over the next 6 months at least, maybe a year, because of the overall low vaccine rates. I think we will continue to endorse everybody getting the vaccine, being vaccinated, having your immunity so that you can protect yourself and your family. We know that there is high quality data supporting the overall safety and efficacy of these vaccines. And I think one thing that isn't being talked about right now is that with the decrease in overall coverage, which leads to decreased herd immunity, we're not really talking about the other components of that MMR vaccine. One of those is rubella. And so I think especially if we're talking about women of childbearing age who may not be immune, and we may see these effects later on, I hope not, but an increase in the rise of congenital rubella, which can lead to many, many effects on the child in utero. So I think we will probably touch on that in another show, but just wanted to say that there will also be downstream effects, not only what we're seeing with lack of measles immunity, but maybe later on with lack of rubella immunity, especially in those women of childbearing age. So everybody, please understand your vaccine status and go get vaccinated if you are not immune or protected from measles.
Dr. Lepping, final thoughts today.
Well, I think that this is a really exciting time for music research and music in medicine research. There's a lot of workers in this area right now who are trying to understand how we can get from music is just something nice that we do to something that is important and something that is something we can have on prescription.
You know, I've loved this so much. I think about a lot of my own personal experiences. I've had the great blessing to be able to travel a lot. And when I go down the Ozarks, man, in the morning, the sun's coming up, the mist is on the water, and the birds are just going at it. And to me, that's music. And in the night, you hear the rise of the katydids and the crickets and the locusts, and they're just going on this wave of different sounds. And it's a concert down there across the water. And I've traveled all over, you know, whether it's the mountains in the Andes or the jungles in the Amazon, or it's been Austria. The music is so different, but it feels like it belongs in that culture, in that moment. Just as little bluegrass sounds pretty darn good down in the Ozarks or in Appalachia. I'm impressed that you're going to actually play me out today, I think. Is that what I've heard? I get to do my final thought? I am happy to. I think this is going to be so cool. And I want to say thanks to everyone for watching and listening. You know, I talk a lot about the impact of faith, hope, and science, but generating faith, hope, and science, what powers your core? For me, I know that power comes often from music, and I listen to it. It's such a huge part of my life whenever I'm in the car, wherever I am. And I can't wait to see where the science takes us about the importance of music. But you said something today that's so important, Dr. Lepping. You don't have to wait on science to do this, because you know it feels good. And music helps you feel good, and there's no real side effects that are going to be bad. And I don't think anybody's going to contest that. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, thanks for hoping along with us. And maybe today you can sing a little along with us too. We'll see you next week.
I'm Alexis Del Cid. On the next All Things Heart, you are watching History in the Making, the first patient ever at the University of Kansas Health System to walk while on VA ECMO, his remarkable story of survival, and why surfing is in the near future. Thursday at 8 a.m.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now everywhere podcasts are available.